Welcome back to the Tracy Donegan podcast. Today we're talking about a different kind of fertility care, one that doesn't just mask symptoms, but focuses on restoring the body's natural function and working with a woman's hormones and cycles. It's about investigating the root cause of why you're not conceiving. If tomorrow you suddenly couldn't digest your food, you want to find out the root cause of the problem. And you'd probably feel a little skeptical if your doctor told you that tube feeding is the best option for you. Fertility care deserves the same attention. So, this approach brings together expert fertility doctors and restorative reproductive specialists, including surgeons, to support everything from fertility and hormonal balance to overall reproductive wellness. I'm delighted to introduce Ailish McEvoy from Women's Natural Path in Ireland. Ailish works with women and couples facing infertility, and her mission is to make that journey as clear, supported, and stress-free as possible. Ailish's passion comes from her own story of living with PCOS, painful irregular periods, and being told that IVF was her best option, even though it didn't feel right for her. But through nutrition, supplements, lifestyle changes, and training with NeoFertility, she learned to restore her health, conceived naturally, and is now mum to two boys, Joshua and Noah. Welcome, Ailish. Hi, Evan. You are very welcome to the next episode of the Tracy Donegan podcast. And today I'm delighted to welcome Ailish McEvoy. Is that right, Ailish?
Yeah, that's it.
From joining us from Ireland. And it's a little chillier in Ireland than it is here in Texas today. But I have been dying to talk to Ailish now for a while. We've been coordinating schedules. So to come on and talk a little bit about reproductive restorative medicine. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, why it's so important for women to understand their cycles, how it can help them achieve pregnancy, and how it can be a great starting point if you are thinking about conceiving, or whether you have gone through IVF, it hasn't been successful, especially for those women out there who are dealing with an unexplained diagnosis. I partially had one of them a few years ago, but it turned out to be early menopause, so who knew? Ailish, you're very welcome. Tell us a little bit about who you are, how you fell into this work, and what is. I always get it mixed up. It's restorative reproductive medicine, or reproductive restorative medicine.
It's restorative. So you're trying to restore reproduction. There's your way to remember.
Restore reproduction. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so restorative reproductive medicine.
Tell me, what is this? Is it new?
No, it's not. It's just not as well known. And essentially, if you have a diagnosis of infertility, there is always an underlying cause. And the objective with restorative reproductive medicine, or RRM, is to find the cause and address it, because your health is so important. So we don't want to just skip over something like a metabolic issue that's causing infertility, and then at later life you're still dealing with that metabolic issue. It makes so much more sense to take that person as an individual, look into why he or she is experiencing infertility, and address the root cause. So in a nutshell, it's root cause medicine.
Okay, so that makes sense. To me, that makes sense. So I think what I'm seeing here in Texas is, especially in my clinic, is women that are coming in and they feel like a lot of time they've been kind of fast tracked into IVF without having done a lot of I guess exploratory blood work or tracking cycles for a couple of months, just to see, well, what is actually happening every month for them, and they feel a little blindsided as well, I think, about the what goes into IVF, because they're like, it's a huge, for most people, financial and emotional and mental investment. It's not just about taking a few shots and creating embryos and hoping for the best. There's a huge amount to it. But when I've been asking the women in my clinic, how, you know, have they heard of this option, or have they had any root cause work done, or is their clinic even doing any like real in-depth testing? And they kind of look at me with blank stares, like nobody had mentioned to them like that they were trying to find an actual reason why they weren't conceiving. And it was like, and what I'm seeing as well is this like band-aid approach. It's like, oh, don't worry about that. You can address that with your, you know, your primary caregiver, or your primary, yeah, like your GP, or, you know, you can see a specialist after we get you pregnant. And which I think, well, so as you said, this whole idea that we're just going to bypass that massive elephant that's in the room, in the hopes that you will have a baby, and that's what everybody wants at the end of this, healthy, happy baby. But we've just completely ignored the fact that we could have a serious metabolic issue, like processing away in the background, that we've just
Mm,
ignored. And now we're going to, and it kind of comes, it resurfaces, you know, around menopause, and
mm,
you're wondering, like, well, why, you know, how long have I had this, and how is it going to impact the rest of my life? When if we'd found the
mm,
root cause originally, we can help women live healthier lives and live
mm,
longer for their new families. I think for me, it's like, this is a no-brainer. We find the root cause.
mm,
If there's anything we can do to, you know, resolve that and restore fertility, that seems like
mm.
that should be the first step, but it's not.
Well, I think if I'm being honest, it is less known about, and unfortunately, it's not very understood, or it's not the first go-to to look for underlying causes of infertility. Because unfortunately, when people are looking for fertility treatment, it's like everyone is focusing on the big goal of the baby. But what about the health of the person? Why is that not the starting point? We want to get the mother especially, and of course, you know, both people as healthy as we can. Because it's not just about, okay, healthy little one. Of course we want a healthy little one. We need a healthy mom too. And not just for this pregnancy, but for future pregnancies. So I don't have the big answer of why it's not the first go-to, but I just think it's the lack of awareness about it. And IVF is sold as this golden ticket, when unfortunately we know that's not the case.
Yeah. Um, so when you're working with women, like, what would be a kind of a, so let's say someone was coming to you for, they've been trying for a while, and everyone just keeps telling them it's unexplained. So
Mm.
what's your process, just for someone who's brand new to this, and they're wondering, like,
Yeah. So firstly, we want to get to know the whole cycle. This is really, really important. And I think this is where restorative medicine completely differs from any other fertility treatment. We want to listen to that woman's body in real time via her fertility chart. Both myself and the doctor need this information to really support her. The fertility chart is basically the woman's biomarkers on a daily basis over her whole cycle. The doctor then uses her fertility chart to time blood tests that are quite in depth to really get a individualized picture of what's happening for her as an individual. It's not just focusing on, oh, did she ovulate? Because we can ovulate with suboptimal hormones and a hostile environment, let's say in the womb, in the endometrium. And I mean, what good is ovulation if the endometrium isn't receptive? This is what's being missed. I think one of the biggest things that's being missed. We cannot just focus on, oh, we're ovulating. What about everything else?
so somebody would work with you for, would it like be a couple of months, and then let's say you found there was something off with her ovulation, her hormones aren't at the levels that they should be at that time. What would be the next steps then?
So if I'm working with somebody, and let's just say somebody comes to me and just says, I just want to get a clear picture of what's going on with my cycle. If we identify that she's got maybe suboptimal ovulation, let's say we confirm ovulation every single cycle, but the hormones are just not performing as you would hope, then we can, if she's happy to, link in with a restorative reproductive doctor. And then the doctor already has her chart and we have her blood tests to have identified that quality of ovulation. And this is where the doctor comes in to run those kind of in-depth tests on day 3 and maybe check the microbiome, check anything that her fertility chart is flagging for her as an individual.
So I think there's some misunderstandings about this as well, that it's completely natural. And so when medication is needed, it's
Mhm.
prescribed.
Yeah. No, that's a really fair point. So when medication is needed, it is prescribed, absolutely. But the most important thing I would like to say here is in many other fertility treatments, it's all about inducing ovulation, getting to that point of ovulation, you know, prescribing something that's going to grow a follicle. But if we do not test for and address everything that could possibly negatively impact that follicle development or implantation, then, what, as I said earlier, what is the point of getting a follicle to grow? The induction of the follicle is almost like the final step, if you like. It's always boost and balance things first before you get to that point, because the environment in the body needs to be optimal first. And if it's a thing that you do need to support a follicle to grow, yes, the doctor will prescribe. But oftentimes we see something like, let's say somebody has metabolic issue and so something like insulin resistance is identified. Sometimes it will be a case of addressing that insulin resistance, improving the sensitivity, and then something like a bioidentical progesterone in the luteal phase after confirmed ovulation to support those progesterone levels and positively impact the follicle even in the next cycle, let's say. And then we see pregnancies with that type of approach all the time. Follicle induction isn't needed there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a gorgeous one that like I've seen that so many times. Let's say in something like PCOS, because for me, sending somebody for with PCOS for follicle and stimulation without addressing insulin resistance is just so unfair to do. So unfair. We know insulin resistance can, firstly, it's so bad for the health. It can also negatively impact implantation. And if you don't address that first, I mean, that's not healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So for like, first, again, for someone who's listening or watching and they've never come across this before, like, what are you looking for in those charts? And are we still doing pen and paper charts? Are we doing this in an app? What's the best way to do it these days?
So we use Charts Neo, and it's an app, and it gives the doctor and myself instant access once you allow us access to your chart. So that means if you're charting away and you've got a question, we can literally just pull up your chart and all of your information is there. So the charts are basically us listening to your body. So we would ask somebody to chart their period in depth, not just record when they're bleeding. We want to know the flow, the color, the duration, if there's clots in it, the size of them, if there's any symptoms with it. And as I said, the color is really, really important. So we're not just kind of saying, oh, when are you bleeding and how many days are you bleeding for? After this, we are starting to listen to your ovaries. So when your ovaries, your follicles within your ovaries start to grow, there's a hormone produced called estrogen, and this tells your cervix to produce mucus. So this is a biomarker, your cervical mucus. So we're listening to your mucus. So depending on the sensation that you feel or the visual mucus that you see, this tells us different things about the level of your estrogen. As your follicle is just kind of starting out on its journey to developing, the estrogen might be lower, it's just rising. The mucus is more gummy or sticky or tacky or white or cloudy. There might be just a damp sensation or there might be no sensation just yet. As your follicle gets closer to ovulation, there's more estrogen. Your cervix is responding by producing mucus that's like raw egg whites, clear, slippery, or stretchy. You can also have a really wet or slippery sensation. So we're looking out for your follicle development via your mucus, which you'll be charting every single day. After you then ovulate, there is an abrupt shift in your mucus observations because the hormone progesterone is released from a new gland in your ovary called the corpus luteum. And this causes an abrupt shift to dryness after you ovulate. And this should be observed for a minimum of 11 days. This is to indicate a sufficient luteal phase length. So these are the biomarkers we use. Cervical mucus, we also use a hormone called luteinizing hormone. They will be the little ovulation test strips. And we also use your basal body temperature. Using those three things together, on top of tracking any bleeding, whether it be your menstrual bleeding or intermenstrual bleeding, premenstrual bleeding, we get such a picture when we listen to all of this and your symptoms. It's literally like Morse codes in your body. And we're just writing it all down and figuring it all out.
That is a great way to think about it, the Morse code from your body. And then, so let's say you're working with somebody and they have kind of mid-cycle kind of spotting every so often, or they have a couple of days of spotting right before their period even starts. What is the code that you're getting from the body around kind of like that kind of spotting? And
Yeah, so depending on if it's premenstrual spotting, the amount of days. So, one day, if it's just one random day and they don't have it every single cycle, that could be considered acceptable just for that one day. But if it's cycle after cycle, and let's say 2 or more days, straight off, this indicates low progesterone. It's a key indicator for low progesterone because progesterone maintains the endometrium, which is what sheds at menstruation. So if we're spotting beforehand, this is what it indicates, that progesterone has maybe dropped off or it was low. So, this is one way we listen to the body. If we're having kind of mid-cycle bleeding, depending on the amount and depending on, again, how many cycles it's persisting over, it could indicate something like the polyp. Some people get ovulation spotting, but again, it depends on the amount. This is where the individual charts are key because if we just take this kind of general advice that we read online, we can be misinterpreting something that really doesn't relate to us as an individual.
yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. And then you mentioned then the color of the blood. So what do we like? What should it be in a healthy woman having healthy cycles?
So a period should last for between 3 to 7 days in duration. And there should be at least one day of good flow, meaning you should change around 3 pads within a day. That'd be mostly full. Ideally, we don't want premenstrual spotting, and ideally, we don't want multiple days of tail end brown bleeding after the period. So, when a period starts, it might be kind of medium flow, where we do say 3 to 4 sanitary parts within a day. And then as each day passes, it kind of tapers off. We don't want like the tail end bleeding per se up to cycle day 9. We don't want that, and especially if it's brown. This is something in charts that might indicate something like endometriosis, so inflammation of the endometrium. It could also indicate low progesterone. So this again is where we do those individualized tests. So if I'm working with somebody and I see a lot of brown bleeding, it'd be very kind of something I'd see then when the doctor do a microbiome test, see if there's or inflammation in the body. This is where the chart allows the doctor to see what tests that this woman does it is a need, because yourself, fertility tests are so expensive, and we're not just gonna give every single woman ones we don't think she needs. We listen to her body. We're listening to her biomarkers every single day through that chart.
And then are there any fertility challenges that ORM can't help? Like let's say somebody has, we'll go extreme. They that both fallopian tubes are blocked from scar tissue or inflammation, whatever that is. Is there a way to help those women?
It depends who you're seeing, I suppose. So somebody who I'd really recommend for something like that is Naomi Whitaker. And she's on Instagram as the macro fertility surgeon. She's amazing, and she has got you've probably seen her. She's got incredible videos of how she unblocks tubes. Like she's incredible for restorative reproductive medicine. And so it depends. It really does depend on who you're with. But again, if somebody's had both tubes removed, like we have to be really honest as well, where we can and can't help. But that's, I think, the difference. We are very, very honest. And like the doctors I work with, they give like, I suppose, like almost percentages, or they'll tell the person they're confident in their ability to get them pregnant. They can absolutely say, we can support your health, no problem. But based on them as an individual, they're not going to sell them promises. This isn't what it's about. It's not about selling false dreams to people.
Yeah, and I think that there's enough of that out there when women are being sold all kinds of
Mm,
cures for whatever about IVF clinics. That's a that's a whole other discussion. But for the the lot of woo that's out there that's being sold to women to that they'll fix all their fertility issues. But I think that's really interesting because I think one of my own ideas about kind of NAPRO and NeoFertility was that it's very much focused on the natural. And yes, we will, if we see something that needs adjusting with medication, that we will use that. But I didn't realize as well that like surgery is part of it as well if it's needed.
yeah,
So
if it's
that's because
needed.
I think that's a misconception that's out there that it's we're just going to do natural. We're going to tell you to not eat sugar and fix all your
Mm.
problems. When if there's blockage, we need to be more aggressive, and surgery then becomes another tool in the toolkit, really.
Yeah, and I think to be clear, medication is often used, but it's not about just throwing medication at something. It's about understanding the body and making sure you've cleared any roadblocks. So, as I was saying to you earlier, so many fertility clinics, it's just get that follicles grow, get somebody to ovulate. But what about like any underlying real health issue that it will be a problem later in life that must be addressed? But yes, if somebody, let's say somebody has got balance cycles for say 6 months and they're not conceiving, and even if they've no symptoms, they might be suggested to check for endometriosis. And yes, if there is endometriosis there, they might opt for surgery. Surgery is something that can be um I guess, used when it's needed. Absolutely. So I suppose I want to just make sure that is clear that yes, medication is used, but the objective is to use it as gently as possible to work with the body's natural rhythm as opposed to going against it.
Yeah. So do you can and of course don't name names and but can you tell us like a case that you've worked on that again for someone who might have been through this kind of mainstream standard of care and then found their way to you and kind of how that all went.
Yeah, of course. So I actually have a lovely client who she's going to be having her baby very, very soon. And they were struggling to conceive, and she and her partner went to the GP, and they said, you'd probably be best to go for IVF. And she just said it just didn't fit right with her. So she came to ourselves, and like I was saying to you earlier, her protocol was so lovely and gentle. It was to support her insulin and glucose and support her luteal phase with progesterone. And she conceived really, really quick within 3 cycles.
Nice.
This is what we can see.
Yeah, everyone wants to hear the success stories. So when you look at the research, because anyone who follows my podcast will know that I'm always on about the research and evidence based
Mm.
recommendations. So how does ORM compare with IVF overall?
Yeah, Dr. Phil Boyle shares a gorgeous video on Instagram or on YouTube, sorry. And he compared the data from his clinic when compared to the IVF clinics in the UK, and in every single age range, they came out more successful. The restorative reproductive medicine from Dr. Boyle's clinic. Again, I suppose we have to consider the fact that every single doctor who's practicing will record their own data. But if anybody wants to see it, you can simply type into YouTube and Dr. Phil Boyle NeoFertility or the IVF, and you'll see the data. He compares them very, very clearly. And I can even pop you on the link after, because the way he shares it, he's sharing not only the success, he's sharing how safer and much safe it is for mothers and babies as well. And that the babies, there was not like less premature babies. So we have to think about this as well. This is an important consideration. So it was more successful. It is more affordable, and it's safer. And that research from Dr. Tilboyle is easy to see, and it's broken down very, very easy to digest as well.
Great. I'll get that link and I'll put it in the
Yeah.
show notes for anyone that's
Mm.
interested. So I guess it's different based on kind of where you live, but can you like just comparison, because that was going to be my next question, like cost wise, because IVF is, unless you're living somewhere where it's, it's covered under your insurance, or you get a couple of free cycles. For the majority of women, they're paying out of pocket, and I've seen some bills where it's like, this is like a down payment on a house. And
Yeah.
it's a 1 month treatment. So what are like kind of the average figures comparing like one IVF cycle to ORM?
So again, it's just individual dependent on the doctors. And so here in Ireland, even I can think of two doctors I work with, and they're very different approaches. And one might have an initial consultation that's €500, and you get a plan. You get a whole plan for that, and you have reviews as and when you need. And then the other clinic has a full package, and this could be about €2,000. And this would include your doctor's appointments, maybe the first follicle tracking scan to ensure a follicle rupture. And then it includes things like if you've got questions, if you need any questions. It doesn't include your fertility advisor support and your what else doesn't it include? Let me think about what else is not included in that. The main thing is your doctor's appointment, your follicle tracking scans, and your prescriptions. It's all in there, and it's not over one cycle, Tracy. It's over as many cycles as it takes for you to conceive. Like obviously, it's not 100% successful, so I'll be clear about that. But it's over the whole time that you need their support. Whereas, like you said, IVF as well. It's one cycle, your investment, and if that cycle is unsuccessful, it's like the hope is gone. Whereas with restorative medicine, it's not like that at all. It's just one cycle, and then we have a fresh cycle to start with. And you still have the support of the doctor himself or your fertility advisor. So I think that in itself like takes the foot off the pedal and allows the nervous system to feel a bit calmer, that it's not like all your eggs in one basket.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can see that how that's helpful, and it's
Mm.
because, yeah, if you've invested like significantly, both emotionally and financially, on one cycle, and it doesn't work. Because I think I'd looked at something from Dr. Boyle, and he had said something like because I think there is this aspect as well of women want to be pregnant yesterday. Like, I don't want to wait, because sometimes they've already been told to wait a year or keep trying, and
Mhm.
but I think for some of those women, they want it to be fast, and then I could totally get why they've been
Yeah.
waiting quite a while. But I think I had seen something that maybe in one of his papers, that like, ideally we're going to be doing this, like it could be 3 months before you get pregnant. We could be tracking cycles for a year, and to get a really
Mm.
good picture, and kind of based on other health aspects as well. And so is part of your work, do you also like make recommendations around lifestyle and nutrition, or would you refer that to someone who specializes in kind of the nutritional aspect of fertility as well?
Yeah, I actually trained in CNM, so I've covered all of that, but it's not specifically part of my work because the fertility advisor work is so in depth, and obviously there's only a certain amount of time I have with each person, and I want to make sure I'm fully and given as much time to their cycle as I can. If they have questions about diet or lifestyle, I will answer, and all my information that I share is evidence based, and it's so important to me uh, that I really have the evidence behind what I'm sharing. But essentially, most of my time on our calls will be about your chart, about your body. And sometimes it will just be a release for the person to just have a good cry about how tough things have been. Because I feel like the emotional aspect is almost overlooked for so many. It's just like, foot on the pedal, go home, do this, do that. It's very like, there's no time for the fact that this is a human being with really strong emotions, and just letting her be or letting them be, you know? Which is so
Yeah,
important.
it's totally missed, and it was one of the reasons why, when a couple of years ago, after kind of uh, moving on from the gentle birth app, because I
Mm,
had so many women ask me, that they were experiencing secondary infertility, and they're like, I love using gentle birth on my first pregnancy. We've been having a really tough time trying to get pregnant. I wish you had a gentle birth for fertility. So Fertile Minds came about
mm,
after that. And I agree that it's so the whole mind body connection just doesn't play into it for so many practitioners in this business. Like I say business intentionally, because we've had like when I developed the Fertile Mind app, it's a mindfulness based app to help women and their partners regulate their stress response during, when they're trying to conceive. Because it was such an overlooked area. But I ended up doing my master's dissertation on uh, mindfulness and women who are going through their first IVF. And it had a significant impact, not just on their coping skills and their mental health, but on outcomes as well, because they're not in that fight or flight response. They're not isolating themselves. It's so easy when you're, to avoid family gatherings and, because you just don't want the questions. I mean, we've had discussions with fertility clinics around running pilot studies so we could incorporate the Fertile Mind app with their care, and they had no interest. They had no interest in women's mental health in their clinic. And they will have a referral on their website for an acupuncturist and a counselor. But the response we found was quite shocking, that they had absolutely no interest. And the fact that so many of the fertility clinics in the last couple of years, networks have been purchased by private equity with a focus on, professional young women to freeze their eggs and literally have you become a patient very early on and keep you coming back for more. So that really, for me, opened my eyes to the business of making babies, and of course, I'm sure there are really amazing practitioners out there that work in IVF clinics that really do care about the emotional impact of this journey on their clients. But we found overall they have no interest. No interest. And this was at one of the biggest international fertility conferences, IVF conferences in the world. That was speaking to the CEOs of these fertility networks. It was very clear to us that this was not a priority for them.
Wow. Like, it kind of leaves you a bit speechless because, you know, it is really kind of ignoring how our emotions impact our physical health. And our physical health is a foundation of fertility. And okay, so when you're saying that, it makes me think if, our health and restoring health was a priority, how many people would actually need IVF?
Yeah. Well, then we kind
You
of
know?
we go down that rabbit hole of, well, the pharmaceutical industry doesn't like to figure out root cause because it wants you to be a patient forever, because that's good business if you're a subscriber, and you keep
I
coming back. Why would we want to find the root cause when, that was really disappointing for me. I thought I had more faith in humanity, but that was a little jarring, to say the least. Ailish, tell me where people can find you online, and let us know your email address, and I will include all of this in the show notes as well.
Yeah, of course. So my website is womennaturopath.com, and my Instagram handle is just women's naturopath, and I share as much as I possibly can in terms of information. I suppose I teach women one-to-one daily. This is my biggest place to get as much information out to as many as I can. And I'm constantly trying my best to share really good information that's going to educate women to understand their bodies. So you'll find some good information there. And my email address is ailish@womennaturopath.com.
Lovely. Ailish, thank you so much for spending the time with me today. And it's I'm really excited about this aspect of fertility care for women and their partners. I think it's about time, and I think we're seeing change here in the US of really finding like root cause and getting back to basics, and women starting to demand more and not just taking medical advice at face value, and which is unfortunate and fortunate in some ways. But we're
Mm.
in my other work with working as a birth doula, I'm seeing more and more parents really engaging with the evidence and
Mm.
asking for evidence-based care, and not just making assumptions based on an OB's website or because
Mm.
a friend of a friend worked with an OB. Um, it's yeah, it's very interesting times, and I think as women learn more, and this is part of kind of why I wanted to have you on, is to, for myself to learn a little bit more about it, and for women, that because there is so little awareness
Mm.
about this option, and it just makes sense. Like, we figure out what's wrong, and then we fix the problem if we can, but we don't just bypass it and force the body to do something that it's may not work, or it may work, but we still have an underlying condition that hasn't been acknowledged and is not being treated. So I think for long term longevity for women's health, and these women hopefully becoming mothers, that they're around for a long time and they're healthy for a long time with their as their families grow. So thank you again. It was, yeah, fascinating. I'm looking forward to digging into this a lot more.
Oh, you're gonna love it. It's really, really great. And I think at least every single person should be presented this as an option to make an informed choice. That's the
Yeah.
most important thing. Whatever way any individual goes is completely their choice. But if you're left without knowing about this, then your decision is not informed. And that's the biggest thing we want to change.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, let women make the decision. Just, but let's
Mm,
present them with all of the information. And right now, there's a significant imbalance in the information that women are getting
absolutely.
about this area of reproductive medicine. And but it looks like you're out there changing that already, Ailish. So I
Oh, we're
appreciate the
getting
work
there.
you're doing, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of women listening that are scratching their heads, going, "How come I've never heard of this?"
Yeah, yeah. Well,
So thank you.
I'm glad you will have heard of it now. So thanks so much. It was lovely chatting.
Yeah, you too, Ed. We will talk again soon.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Bye bye.